This is Tucker Carlson.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Happy Good Friday, if you can say that. Always a sort of mixed day, and today was no different. A radical black nationalist drove a car into two police officers near the Capitol in Washington this afternoon. One of the officers was killed along with a suspect. Now, what's interesting, and there's still much we don't know about this, we know very little, but this is one high-profile murder that didn't somehow set off an avalanche of hysterical media attacks on an entire racial group. You didn't see stories about how all black people are bad or blackness is a virus. And thank God. That stuff is garbage. It's poison. All decent people hate it. Attacking entire races is evil no matter what the race is. It's really hurting the country, and the people in power should stop doing it. Today, for once, they didn't do it. Thank God for small blessings. But that doesn't mean our leaders turned down the opportunity to leverage the tragedy. Of course they did. Ilhan Omar immediately called for gun control, even though the assailant apparently didn't have a gun, but just a knife. She's not a genius, as we've noted before. Then the usual experts told us the lesson was we need even more barbed wire around the Capitol. It's too open to the public, they said. To keep our democracy safe, we must wall off voters from the leaders who supposedly represent them. Well, that's already happening, of course, across the country, both physically in the green zone style barriers you suddenly see everywhere around government buildings, and also on a far deeper level, on a level that can't be undone as quickly as a fence. In a democracy, the people rule. If voters want something done over time, it happens. That's what self-government is. But what do you call a system in which all the really important decisions are made by big companies without any reference at all to what voters want? Well, that is not democracy. It's corporatocracy. And it's starting to look a lot like what we have now. Here's the latest example. Major League Baseball announced today it's pulling two of the biggest events in sports, the All-Star Game and the MLB Draft, out of the state of Georgia. Why is Major League Baseball weighing in on this? Why is it doing it? Well, because voters in the state of Georgia made a decision that the Biden administration doesn't like. And as with so many big corporations, Major League Baseball believes it now has veto power over the democratic process. And by the way, it may have veto power. We'll find out. In the case of Georgia, the state passed a law to reduce voter fraud. That law requires voters to provide some form of identification before they cast a mail-in ballot. That identification could be a driver's license or free state-provided ID. Georgia makes it pretty easy to prove who you are. There's nothing crazy about this law. In fact, it's hard to believe it wasn't already on the books in Georgia. It should have been. But when it was proposed, it sailed through the State House. Georgia's House of Representatives approved this bill by a 25-vote margin. The state Senate by a vote of 34 to 24. So unlike, say, Obamacare, it wasn't a squeaker. And you can see why. Nationally, the overwhelming majority of Americans agree with it. They support mandatory photo ID for voting. According to a recent poll by the AP, fully 72% of people in this country believe that required IDs are a good idea. And why wouldn't they think that? You already have to show an ID when you fly in a plane or drive a car, open a checking account, hold a job, live in an apartment, or get a vaccine. But you don't need one to vote? Come on, it's ridiculous. In fact, it's worse than ridiculous. It is sinister. Anyone who opposes voter ID laws is encouraging voter fraud, which is to say, encouraging the destruction of democracy. It's that simple. And you can now put Major League Baseball in that category. Now, baseball was supposed to be America's pastime, happy, unifying, fundamentally non-political. So it's strange to see this happen. How do we get here? It's not at all complicated. We have a new president now. And that president is willing to destroy even something as wholesome as the country's traditional game purely to increase the power of his political party. Just the other day, Joe Biden went on ESPN to demand that professional sports franchises boycott any state whose voters step out of line.
I think today's professional athletes are acting incredibly responsibly. I would strongly support them doing that. People look to them. They're leaders. Look at what's happened with the NBA as well. Look at what's happened across the board. The very people who are victimized the most are the people who are the leaders in these various sports. And it's just not right. This is Jim Crow on steroids, what they're doing in Georgia and 40 other states.
So that's the considered judgment expressed out loud by the President of the United States. Georgia's voter ID law is Jim Crow on steroids. Asking people to show their identity before they vote is worse than segregation and lynching. It's Bull Connor and fire hoses and snarling German shepherds on steroids. You got to wonder how long our leaders can keep saying things like this, reckless things like this, before they really cause the society to fall apart. Joe Biden seems determined to find out. One thing Biden doesn't seem very interested in is his own home state, Delaware. Unlike Georgia, Delaware has never permitted mass early voting. Apparently, Delaware is a white supremacist state. About 80% of Georgia voters cast their ballots early last fall. In Delaware, that number was 29%. So why isn't that voter suppression? Why isn't it racism? Well, because Delaware is a one-party state controlled by the Democrats. It's working for them. They're not going to change it. Georgia, by contrast, is a swing state. So, in the estimation of Joe Biden, it is worth using racially divisive lies to win it for his party permanently. According to Joe Biden, the real problem with Georgia's new election law is that it could cause dangerous dehydration. The real problem with Georgia's new election law is that it could cause dangerous dehydration.
What I'm worried about is how un-American this whole initiative is. It's sick. It's sick. Deciding in some states that you cannot bring water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. Deciding that you're going to end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off work.
Every word of that was false. Maybe the Washington Post will start a Joe Biden lie meter. Just kidding. In fact, the Georgia law bans political organizations from bringing...
I'm going to end this here. It goes on almost another 9 minutes. You can watch it on YouTube. Just as an experiment, I've never asked anybody